Tonight on Chat News at 5, United Voices. A protest supporting the Black Lives Matter movement is taking place right now in Medicine Hat. And labor force. Alberta's unemployment is the second highest in the country.
From Medicine Hat, this is the Chat Evening News with Dan Reinish.
When you walk away today, acknowledge your white privilege and put it to use instead of denying it or staying silent. Thank you.
After days of protests around the world following the death of George Floyd, a protest supporting the Black Lives Matter movement is taking place right now in Medicine Hat. Good evening. Thank you for watching. Scott Roblin is at the protest outside of City Hall, and let's go right to him tonight. Scott.
Yeah, Dan, it's a powerful atmosphere here down at City Hall with a crowd that's just grown and grown as the afternoon has gone along for Medicine Hat's Black Lives Matter and police brutality protest going down here at City Hall. And like I said, it has grown from about 50 to 75 to roughly about 350 protesters here, all wanting to lend their voice and complete some speeches as well to those in attendance going against racism and police brutality. And we are joined by a protester here. So sorry if I could just grab your name one more time.
Arish Wall.
Arish, this is obviously a very powerful day for a lot of people here in town, and for you, you're able to go up and complete a pretty powerful speech. And Arish, just what was it like being able to deliver that in front of the crowd here?
It was quite nerve-wracking. Just seeing the amount of people that are out here today, and just knowing like a small town like this is willing to make a change, is trying to make a difference. It really filled my heart with joy, because it's not every day we see people all across the world, like all across even Canada. Canada is it's a very small-minded community when it comes to racism and police brutality. So knowing that people are starting to open up and see that they're all out here to come and support, it means the world to me.
And with all the support that's been shown here, Arish, what has been your reaction to just seeing this crowd grow and grow since you first arrived here this afternoon?
It gives me hope that one day there will be a change. You know, it gives me a sense of relief that, one day that my daughter, she will be able to grow in peace without having somebody discriminating against her because the color of her skin. It gives me hope that, that now that people are able to walk side by side without worrying about, I'm not going to profile this person because they're lighter toned than this person, but now that we're able to bring awareness to equality and justice for everybody and show that, we're just a human race. So.
And this has been a very peaceful protest, and there's been a lot of cooperation from a lot of parties, whether it's the organizers, the protesters, the police, kind of on the outskirts of this. What has it been like seeing this go off so smoothly and everybody really wanting to make a difference here in the community?
Well, I know the organizers, that's what they really wanted. We just wanted a peaceful protest to show that, we can still have a voice while we're still calm. We can still have a voice while we're all still very mellow and just gathering together and just to support one another, So I think with how the protest is going right now, it's beautiful, because this will show the next generation of kids that, we don't need to be aggressive. We don't need to be violent. We don't need to destroy things and damage other people's property, that we can all come together and we can still make a statement.
And right now, as we speak, speeches going on, hundreds of people at City Hall Plaza here. What are you hoping to take out of this experience, and what are you hoping the rest of the crowd here takes out of this experience?
Honestly, I just want everybody, for me and everyone else here, just to look at one another as human beings. Like, we should not have different races, different colors. Yes, I understand we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different roots where our parents come from, our great-grandparents. But at the end of the day, when I look at you and you look at me, we both have two futures of everything. So it's just like, I just want this experience to grow out and make it a point that, it's time to stop this racial identifying people with races, and just look at one another like we're all humans, because we all have families, brothers, mothers, and fathers too. So that's what I really wanted to get out of this.
Well, it's definitely an emotional and powerful experience here for a lot of people involved. Rachel, thank you so much for taking part today.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, this protest is going to be going on at least for another half an hour or so. Still a few more speeches to go. We will have an update later on in tonight's newscast. Back to you, Dan.
Scott Bromlin recording from City Hall Plaza tonight at the Black Lives Matter protest here in Medicine Hat. We will have more on the protests that took place today across North America coming up later here on Chat News at 5. Alberta is changing how it deals with impaired drivers. Starting later this year, first-time offenders won't necessarily face a criminal charge. Alex McQuaig has more on new legislation that will see police fine first-time offenders instead of putting them in front of a judge.
Tow trucks are often on standby at check stops to cart away vehicles while court appearances await those charged with impaired driving. Under new legislation, you'll still get towed, but those court proceedings will be a thing of the past for first-time offenders. Defense lawyer Rob Robinar says being issued a ticket and not being able to fight the offense in the courts is an erosion of due process.
The best prevention for someone is a criminal record, and I think by tacking on administrative penalties, I think it's the wrong approach to take. I think with this new, what they're proposing, you're going to give up the presumption of innocence. You're going to give up all your charter protection. Basically, for a police officer, you failed at a roadside sample, then you're going to be basically penalized. So essentially, you're going to have the officer at the side of the road basically being judge, jury, and executioner.
Advocates for the legislation point to BC, which has similar laws that are credited with a reduction in impaired driving. And Inspector Brent Secondiak says the new rules would see a large reduction in both police and court staffing required for criminal convictions. And he says he rejects the argument it gives police too much authority.
I think it's unfounded. I mean, there's a lot of tickets and sanctions we issue now with suspended drivers and tickets, so it's just another form of that. I think the plus side of it is there's no criminal record on a first offense, so I think there's a lot of benefits to the community in that regards.
If passed, the new legislation would see the immediate roadside sanction program enacted by the end of the year. Alex McQuaig, Chat News.
Here in Medicine Hat at this hour, it's fairly overcast. Some sunny breaks when I was outside this afternoon, but it's fairly overcast. As we head into this evening, the cloud is going to continue to dominate what is happening out there, and there is a 30% chance of rain tonight, and the amount of rain expected tomorrow is now possible here in Medicine Hat of as much as 40 millimeters. The full AccuWeather forecast coming up, but as right now, 24 out there with an east-southeasterly wind of 15, gusting a little bit stronger at times. Here's a view once again of the South Saskatchewan River, and remember, as the city's been asking, stay off the river this weekend. Straight ahead, the COVID-19 pandemic has hit the local hotel industry hard. The province's chief medical health officer says today's announcement marks an occasion to be celebrated. Dr. Dina Hinshaw reported only 7 new cases out of over 6,400 tests in the past 24 hours in our province. That's the highest number of tests done and the lowest daily number of cases since March 12th. She says the number of active cases in the province continues to trend downward, with 328 active right now. Also announced new visiting guidelines for loved ones receiving care in hospitals.
As the COVID-19 pandemic has evolved, we have continuously monitored the situation and adjusted our measures as necessary. Effective tomorrow, Alberta Health Services will be releasing updated visitation guidelines for all patients in both acute outpatient and inpatient settings. These revised guidelines expand the allowance of some visitation while maintaining specific criteria intended to protect patients, residents, volunteers, and staff. For more information, you can access the updated guidelines from AHS's webpage. I want to be clear that these guidelines only apply to hospital settings. The existing standards and rules for continuing care remain in effect. We know that visitor restrictions in continuing care are a hardship in these settings as well. and we will be seeking input from residents, families, and operators on how we can balance needs for connection and needs for safety in these settings so we can continue to make adjustments in the best interests of all those in these settings.
Dr. Hinshaw also said today an announcement on Phase 2 is anticipated for early next week. That will include final decisions on the beginning date and what's included in the second stage. More information on today's update can be found online at chatnewstoday.ca. Alberta's unemployment rate is the second highest in the country. It increased 2 percentage points to 15.5%. This despite a labor force survey released today showing we gained 28,000 jobs in May, after a decline of 361,000 jobs between February and April. The job increases were driven by the service sector after restaurants and hair salons were given the go-ahead to reopen. With 2 hotels set to open and another couple in the planning stages here in Medicine Hat, the local accommodation sector appeared to be doing well until the COVID-19 pandemic struck. The postponement of the Jehovah's Witness Convention and countless amateur sports tournaments has hit the local sector hard. The director of the Medicine Hat Accommodation Association, Alicia Ammon, says the hotels are now eagerly awaiting a return of businesses coming back to Medicine Hat to use their rooms and facilities once again.
Here we are, a couple months into all of this, and a lot of the hotels are being able to call some of their staff back now. So that's been really encouraging as to what the industry is going to look like moving forward and into the summer. We have had a lot of projects happening around Medicine Hat, and so that has helped, having those construction workers and those infrastructure projects and that happening. So that's helped with the local hotel business. And moving forward, we're really looking forward to welcoming leisure travelers again.
She estimated the local economic impact of losing even a smaller amateur sports tournament at around $250,000. For many local businesses, reopening has been a lot more than turning on the lights. To meet public health guidelines, many have endured extra costs in an attempt to get back to business. Today, the province announced $200 million in grant money for small and medium-sized businesses. Owners can access up to $5,000 to help offset a portion of their relaunch costs. The money can be used to pay for physical barriers, PPE, employee wages, or replacement of inventory. An offline application is expected to be available in the coming weeks. Details on eligibility requirements are still being worked out. Camping was given the green light to begin in Alberta as of June 1st, and that means you may see some of your neighbors packing up and hitching up the trailer this weekend. Chantel Wagner has more from campers who are starting off the season here in Medicine Hat.
The first week of camping is in the books for those wanting to get out of the house and enjoy the great outdoors. And while it looks like a normal weekend, there have been some changes because of the pandemic. Of Gas City Campground's 98 sites, it includes having the campground at 80% capacity and no visitors for the time being.
Anywhere that we couldn't have essentially 20 feet between pads, we've taken away as well. So there's roughly about 18 sites that we've taken away.
Richter says the campground is all booked for this weekend, which is really good for June. He anticipates July and August to be full as normal and says it's booking up for the long weekends. When it comes to booking a site, Richter says there's been no provincial direction on campers staying from out of province at municipal campgrounds.
They haven't said you could or couldn't, so we've followed suit so far, and we have allowed it. So we're seeing a few, but there's not that many. BC, Saskatchewan is probably the two that we're seeing, but it's not significant.
He says most are from Alberta, and so far about 30 to 40% of campers are from Medicine Hat.
I think it's encouraging people to have that staycation. They can come to a campground that's inside, outside the city. It's a beautiful location and still enjoy the outdoors.
We are from 10 minutes from here. Yeah, and most people we met over the last 2 days are also from Medicine Hat.
It's a staycation, yeah. It's nice and close. It's perfect, especially with all the social distancing and everything. It's perfect timing to do this.
It's our first time camping for the season, so we thought we would stay close just in case something happens with our camper.
And a couple from Victoria, BC stopped in southeast Alberta this week while moving their mother from Manitoba.
Wonderful. It feels great. And it's, people are wonderful. Everyone's keeping their distance and the place is great. It's nice to be out in the fresh air.
Meantime, visitors have the chance to view the tree carvings by local artist Marina Cole. The carvings capture the popular animals in the region like deer and even raccoons seen in recent weeks. Cole beautified the space with some trees that were dying that would otherwise need to be removed.
It's so nice to reuse the material. If this was not a deer, it would just be a stump in the ground. So it's kind of nice to be able to reuse it and keep these trees around a little bit longer.
As for the chance of easing restrictions this camping season, Richter says it depends on phase 2 of the government's plan if camping guidelines can be lifted a little bit more. Chantal Wagner, Chat News.
Time for a break here on Chat News at 5. When we come back, the AccuWeather forecast for the weekend is not one campers will likely enjoy. That and this story when we come back. Coming up, with restrictions lifting, there are ways you can help children adjust into a new routine. In addition to the ongoing one in Medicine Hat, anti-racism protests took place right across the country today, from Halifax to Vancouver and more than a dozen cities in between. Canadians are taking to the streets in solidarity with American demonstrators. For some, it's not just the solidarity with, but because of the race relations in this country. In America, racism is almost entirely about the mistreatment of blacks. In Canada, the issue is broader. You cannot address race in Canada and not include the treatment of Indigenous peoples. These marches are happening to raise awareness that racism, individual and systemic, still exists, but not just in America, in Canada too. More details on the marches coming up in about 15 minutes here on Chat News at 5. Coming off a stay-at-home order and easing back into a routine can be hard on anyone, especially children, but there are ways you can help them adjust. Andy Gaither has more.
Even with stay-at-home orders easing, life is anything but normal right now.
If you go from 0 to 60, it's going to feel really overwhelming.
Licensed therapist Jody Baumstein with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta's Strong for Life says to ease back into it all.
I think just recognizing that it's a completely normal response to change. There's nothing wrong with you if you feel nervous about going back.
A common sign of stress in children is anxiety, which can look different depending on the age of the child.
When you look under the surface, they're having some racing thoughts, or they're really thinking a lot about safety, and that's consuming them and making them a little bit distracted, but it doesn't mean that they're trying to be difficult.
Younger children may regress in behavior or have unexplained headaches or stomach aches to avoid leaving the house. Baumstein says help children identify what they're feeling, let them know what to expect, what they might see that's different, like face masks. Ask open-ended questions to get them talking, then validate the feelings, let them know it's normal. And don't dismiss what's being felt. Work with them on how to cope. Those are skills they can use for the rest of their lives. For today's Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
There's a special moment that takes place after cancer treatments. The ringing of a bell. Now, according to an Alberta study, that ritual means a lot more to patients than just making some noise. Here's Sulin Go.
It's a tradition at cancer centers around the world. Finish treatments, ring the bell. For Terry Fellman, the end of 16 rounds of chemotherapy last week called for a special outfit and a lot of noise.
You ring that sucker. Yay! Woo-hoo! So many emotions. I wanted to cry, but I was happy tears.
New nursing research from the University of Alberta suggests the ringing ritual helps patients and their loved ones mentally transition to whatever comes next.
It was a target and a goal, and ideally beginning of the next stage of their life.
But Dr. Edie Patuskin says hearing the bell isn't positive for everyone.
People with advanced disease or people who are getting chronic treatments that go on and on and on for months and years may never get to ring the bell.
For me, it was like a beacon of hope.
Study participants Adam Hardwick Brown and his wife Colleen would hear the clanging during his 30 radiation treatments for tongue cancer. The sound became symbolic.
You know, there's still a long journey, but you actually made it through that. You know, you conquered that part of it.
And now I have a bond with all the other people who have rung that bell. And we are like a fraternity.
Terry says grabbing that bell finally gave her a sense of control over her situation, and listening to the joy when others rang it brought everyone together.
Being able to hear that sound and support them and know that everyone in there is supporting each other, and when you have your moment, they're there to clap for you too.
We're done!
Sulingo, Global News.
Chat Weather, brought to you by Design Flooring Center. With you every step of the way. Chat Weather, powered by AccuWeather.
We're heading into a weekend that is going to see some very, very active weather, courtesy of a Montana low that is going to push up and push through Alberta and Saskatchewan. Here in Medicine Hat, we're looking at a 30% chance of precipitation tonight, maybe a millimeter or two. That could also stick around for tomorrow morning and the early part of tomorrow afternoon. But the main part of the Montana low that I'll show you in just a moment is going to hit us tomorrow into the evening and overnight. Earlier this week, we were talking about 10 to 15. Earlier today, I was talking about 20 to 25 millimeters starting on Saturday. Right now, there is a chance that what hits us here in Medicine Hat could leave Saturday into Sunday between 30 and 40 millimeters of rain. And then there's a chance of another 5 to 10 millimeters of rain once we get into Sunday, and Monday could bring even more rain. That'll be on the other side of the Montana low, but that low is what is coming for us. Most of northern Alberta and the central part of the province will see it too. And in Saskatchewan, let me get to it in a second. Today, 24 degrees outside right now. It's cloudy and 25. Wind gusting up to about 30 kilometers an hour. The wind could gust up to 50 tonight. Look for a sustained wind tomorrow of about 20 to 30, and then on Sunday between 30 and 40. In addition to all of that rain, cloudy right now in Drumheller 21, cloudy in Brooks 20 degrees, cloudy in Lethbridge 22, Calgary cloudy in 17, a mix of sun and cloud in Bow Island at 23, and in Edmonton 18 degrees under a mainly sunny sky. Saskatchewan, 18 and mainly sunny in Saskatoon, 21 and mainly sunny in Swift Current, 22 mainly sunny in Regina, 23 in Leader with a mix of sun and cloud, and Maple Creek, 24 degrees and cloudy. There's the clouds manifesting themselves this afternoon. Not much to see there. Let's get right to this thing that we're looking at. So this low pressure system is going to hit Montana and then start to move up. And you're going to see some dark colored rain surrounding that low pressure system as it moves up. Fort McMurray could see as much as 70 to 80 millimeters of rain Saturday into Sunday. I told you the numbers that we are looking at. Now, in addition to all of this rain that's coming, there's also a strong risk of a thunderstorm Saturday into Sunday as well, because temperatures, as I'll show you in the 7-day forecast coming up in a bit, temperatures are going to cool off by 7 or 8 degrees. And with the risk of a thunderstorm, that 30 or 40 here in Medicine Hat area could become much more. Although we are used to seeing these systems peter out and not really affect us. As the low rises up, it is, as I said, in Saskatchewan as well and moving up. Look into the areas around Leader that could see some very, very strong thunderstorms and an incredible amount of rain falling over the course of the weekend. Watch the sky, listen for thunderstorm, listen for lightning. Take care out there if you're heading out there this weekend, because this could be some nasty stuff. Brooks, you're looking at the rain into the evening. Leader, you're looking at rain into the evening tomorrow as well. Maple Creek, rain for you with some sunny starts to the day. And here in Medicine Hat, rain and then rain into the evening. But that will give you the opportunity to take some photos if you're heading outside, which we would love to see your pictures of this horrible weather. But don't put yourself in harm's way, much like Kathleen didn't have to do. So Kathleen says the Blue Jays come for peanuts several times each day, and they're becoming more and more trusting. Well, Kathleen, you had to know a picture of a Blue Jay, especially on this day, the 5th of June, which was the date that Skydome opened back in 1989. You had to know this was going to be our weather picture of the day. Weather pics at chatnewstoday.ca. That's weather pics at chatnewstoday.ca. Kathleen, thank you for your picture and for watching. Take care again out there this weekend. And if you do take any pictures for us, make sure you don't get in harm's way. Still to come, anti-racism rallies took place all across the country today as Canadians call for an end to racism. There are or have been anti-racism rallies taking place all across the country today. The one in Medicine Hat is ongoing, and we'll check back in with Scott Roblin in about 15 minutes here on Chat News at 5. In Ottawa, Toronto, and from Halifax to Vancouver and cities in between, Canadians took to the streets in solidarity with American demonstrators. But as Eric Sorensen explains, they're also calling for an end to racism in this country, not just Black Lives Matter.
The march was large and it was peaceful. In Canada's biggest city, store owners weren't taking chances, but the participants were almost universally determined to send a non-violent message. That racism does exist and must be addressed.
And I believe that in this moment, that it is a perfect storm. We are all paying attention, maybe because of COVID-19, but certainly because of George Floyd and the horrific things that we witnessed on social media and on the television screen. And, you know, to say enough.
There's nothing simple about organizing such a demonstration these days. The pandemic is still with us, and social distancing did not seem to be carefully observed here. Certain advocacy groups for blacks took a pass on supporting this event, and some are critical that police were included in the planning. Still, Toronto's police chief and other officers took a knee to show solidarity.
What we hope will be a lasting platform for change through peace and communication between the community members and our civic leaders.
For some, marches here are not just in solidarity with what's happening in the United States, but reflect the unique history of race relations in this country. In Canada, the issue is broader. You cannot address race in this country and not include the treatment of Indigenous peoples.
It's literally once a week we hear about an Indigenous person being brutalized by a police officer. And so for decades, we've had a problem with anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism by police.
For blacks in Toronto, the relationship with police is strained. There are practical proposals to outfit officers with body cameras.
To make sure that we are doing everything we can to fast-track body cameras for all Toronto police officers.
But it will take time to establish trust.
I have a twin brother who actually had cops invade his house and put guns to his face and totally be way too violent.
Addie Stewart says blacks in Canada still do not experience the equality other Canadians take for granted.
This multicultural paradise, nah, we're not there yet. We are so not there yet. There's so much more work to do.
Other marches are happening across Canada over the weekend to raise awareness that racism, individual and systemic, still exists, and that Canadians first have to accept that, then push for change. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The protests show no sign of ending in the U.S., where the president again called on governors to dominate the streets. Day after day, thousands of marchers are demonstrating in communities big and small, leading to an increasing number of conflicts with police. As Jackson Prosco reports, there's growing concern about the response of law enforcement in response to peaceful marchers.
In a nation on edge, mass protests are pushing Americans to their limits. In Buffalo, New York, a 75-year-old man was shoved to the ground by riot police. He suffered a serious head injury. At first, police claimed he tripped. They later suspended the officers involved.
Why? Why was that necessary? Where was the threat?
It comes after a week that saw Buffalo police struck by a car during protests, and as the debate rages over the proper use of force nationwide.
Are you serious?
In New York, a delivery driver was arrested for violating curfew, despite being exempt as an essential worker. And when police unleashed tear gas and pepper spray balls on protesters outside the White House Monday, officers brutalized an Australian TV crew.
Exactly what it looks like. We're just staying safely.
Oh! Whoa! Later claiming they failed to clearly identify themselves as journalists, despite holding a camera.
You have to dominate the streets. You can't let what's happening happen. It's called dominate the streets.
The president continues to call for a heavy-handed response from his perch behind the 2 kilometers of new fencing that surround the White House. Trump even suggested this is a positive moment for race relations in America, invoking the name of George Floyd.
Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying there's a great thing that's happening for our country. There's a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody.
Instead of discouraging marchers, the police response seems to have drawn larger crowds in peaceful protest.
No justice, no peace.
The demands for accountability and reform are growing louder.
It took a war to end slavery. And if it takes protests, if it takes people holding up signs, if it takes people coming out and just petitioning for people like my life, my skin color, my friend's skin color to matter, then that's a lot better than war.
This weekend, cities across America are bracing for massive demonstrations, perhaps the largest to date. A sign that the death of George Floyd has triggered the Great Awakening long sought by so many.
The city of Washington, D.C. has painted these giant words, Black Lives Matter, on the road to the White House. It spans 2 blocks with each of the 16 bold yellow letters spanning the width of the 2-lane street. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser's office says the mayor contracted the painters and work began early this morning. The mayor has officially deemed the section of the city bearing the mural Black Lives Matter Plaza, complete with a new street sign. Washington has been the site of more than a week's worth of protests in response to the death of George Floyd. The mural project comes ahead of a planned protest tomorrow where a large turnout is expected. There have been daily protests since George Floyd passed away on May 25th. Health officials fear that could result in a spike of coronavirus cases. With this story, here's John Lawrence.
I will see everybody tomorrow. Please, let's go home safe.
People who have protested within the last 2 weeks are advised to get tested for COVID-19.
I do think there is a potential, unfortunately, for this to be a seeding event.
Dr. Robert Redfield, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, says the risk of getting infected is more likely in larger cities that haven't controlled outbreaks.
Minneapolis happens to be one that was still having significant transmission. DC is another one. We really want those individuals to highly consider being evaluated.
Although some protesters wear masks, there's minimal social distancing within the crowds, and tear gas, used occasionally by law enforcement, can make people cough and increase the likelihood of spreading the virus.
We have advocated strongly the ability to have face coverings and masks available to protesters so that they can at least have those coverings.
The CDC published a forecast Thursday that predicts more than 127,000 deaths in the U.S. by June 27th. Researchers say the data projects a decline in weekly coronavirus deaths, but that could change if the coronavirus thrives among protesters. I'm John Lawrence reporting.
When we return here on Chat News at 5, the latest on the police shooting of a 26-year-old Indigenous woman in New Brunswick. Welcome back to Chat News at 5. The Prime Minister announced this morning the federal government is offering more money to premiers as they reopen their economies. It could help support those who do not have benefits right now.
We're also talking about sick pay of up to 10 days for workers who currently don't have benefits. The federal government would provide the funds needed to make this happen.
That money will come from the $14 billion dedicated to provinces and territories. Trudeau says the money is for more personal protective equipment for health workers and businesses. It can be used for childcare so parents can go back to work and can go towards support for cities and municipalities struggling through the pandemic. Trudeau says he will continue to work with the premiers on where exactly the money will be allocated. The Prime Minister also spoke out today about racial incidents happening in this country, including 2 new revelations involving Indigenous people. In one case, an Inuk man was struck by the door of an RCMP cruiser in Nunavut, and there was a police-involved shooting of a woman in New Brunswick.
Later today, I'll be speaking with Cabinet and to the RCMP Commissioner. We need to ensure that each of these individual cases is investigated properly, but we also need a larger reflection on changing the systems that do not do right by too many Indigenous people and racialized Canadians.
Trudeau says all necessary changes can't be done overnight, but the country must start this important work today. The police shooting of a 26-year-old Indigenous woman in New Brunswick is raising all kinds of questions. The Edmundston police had been asked to do a wellness check on Chantel Moore. Now, her family, Indigenous leaders, and Canada's Indigenous Services Minister want to know why the officer who checked on her shot and killed her.
I'm pissed. I'm outraged. There needs to be a full accounting of what has gone on. This is a pattern that keeps repeating itself.
Silas Brown is in New Brunswick looking for answers.
It's been 1 day since Chantel Moore was shot and killed by Edmundston police inside her home, and a growing chorus of people are chanting for justice. And for some, justice means answers.
1, finding out the truth. 2, honoring that truth. And the third piece, giving life to that truth. So that, to me, is complete justice.
The Nachalnith Tribal Council is calling for an immediate, independent investigation to provide just that. The 26-year-old Moore, originally from British Columbia, was shot by an officer performing a wellness check. Edmundston police have handed the investigation off to Quebec's police watchdog. But for Mariah Charlson, the incident speaks to the need to better train police in de-escalation and trauma-informed practices.
We don't want to see any more of our women, Indigenous women, men, anybody, any human being. We do not want to see our people dying at the hands of the police doing a health check.
According to Lorraine Whitman, the president of the Native Women's Association of Canada, fear and distrust is inherent in any encounter an Indigenous person has with the police.
And that fear is within, and I can't imagine how this young lady would have felt that hour of the morning and a police officer coming to the door and knocking.
Because the officer went in alone and Edmundston police are not equipped with body cameras, we may never know what happened. But Moore's family and her community will not stop trying to find out and to find justice. Silas Brown, Global News, Edmundston, New Brunswick.
We'll head back to Scott Roblin outside City Hall for the Black Lives Matter movement protest when we come back here on Chat News at 5. Protest supporting the Black Lives Matter movement has been underway outside Medicine Hat City Hall since 4 o'clock. Scott Roblin is there and he has a guest with him, one of the organizers. Here's Scott with Brooke Young. Scott.
Yeah, Dan, Medicine Hat's Black Lives Matter and police brutality protest wrapping up about half an hour ago here at City Hall. As you can see in the background, still a lot of activity as people milling about and having conversations at the end of this powerful day. And we're joined by organizer Brooke Young, who helped put on this protest. And Brooke, now that this is in the rearview mirror of this protest, just what was this afternoon like for you and the other organizers?
It was absolutely amazing. The turnout was incredible, and we had a lot of support, which was really appreciated. And we also had a couple extra guest speakers too, which was really nice. So yeah, it was awesome.
Over the course of the afternoon, it went from about 50 to 100 to probably about 350, 400 protesters by the peak of it. What was it like to see the community come out and people of all different backgrounds and ages wanting to take part?
Yeah, it was amazing to see, and there was a lot of support. And for the most part, everyone looked like they were having a good time and enjoying it. So.
Especially with the speakers who wanted to take time, share their personal stories with racism and police brutality. What did that mean to you and the rest of the organizers for them to openly share their stories at the podium?
That was really amazing. We were actually really surprised by the response we did get by the community with sharing their stories. It makes it a lot more impactful, and it makes it a lot more real, because you can hear about something and it doesn't really apply to you, but when you hear about real life stories, it does. So that was amazing, yeah.
And for the most part, this protest really went off without a hitch. It was very peaceful. There weren't really any incidents. There were police kind of along the perimeter, just making sure everything was going to plan. But, what was the buy-in like from the community to keep it peaceful, and also the assistance from police and first responders that were on scene as well?
Yeah, it was really amazing. We actually had 4 police officers across the street at the whole time, I believe, which was really nice to keep the peace. And for the most part, everyone seemed really happy and proud to have them by our side, which was really nice.
For you, now that this protest is wrapped up, what do you take away from this afternoon, and what do you hope the protesters take away from their experience this afternoon?
I would take away from this that it doesn't matter where you come from. It's always okay to speak up against something that's wrong and not to ignore racism and to call it out when you see it, because a lot of times if we're in a smaller town, we don't want to do that because we don't think it's a problem, but it is. And I think everyone should take away from this that no matter where you come from, you can always speak out and you can always make a change.
Well, definitely a powerful atmosphere and afternoon here at City Hall as the Black Lives protest wrapping up about half an hour ago. More details on the protest and video can be found online at chatnewstoday.ca. Back to you in studio, Dan.
Scott Roller reporting from outside City Hall today. The next protest in our neck of the woods will be taking place in Brooks on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Basketball fans have been waiting patiently. We have since March 11th, and the wait looks to now be soon over. The NBA Board of Governors and players have come to an agreement on a plan to return to the hardwood. But what does that mean for the defending champion Toronto Raptors? Anthony Bruno has more.
Step back, range. His name is Kyle Lowry.
That was the last time we saw the Raptors in action as they beat the Utah Jazz back in March, their 46th win of the season. And now the NBA is finally on track to return, with the league's Board of Governors and players approving a 22-team return-to-play format with a tentative start date for July 31st.